mentioned the tree, this amazing tree in the film. How did you come across that tree, and what it felt like it really meant something?
No, that is such a great question for us. By the way, the poet in the film has come out. Brathwaite, just want to big him up. He passed away. We lost him 2 years ago, and I didn't even know that he'd written that poem until after he passed. And I didn't know him personally, but people in this literary universe around the world, but especially in the Caribbean, really revere him. So I just wanted to name that.
And that's the poem of about the goat.
About the goat, and it's about it's called The Making of the Drum, because the drum is made from the goat skin and other elements. So we decided to film this thing. There was a girl who was a dancer, and she became the actress. And she said, "I'm available on this day." So we went into the country. Went first to Portland, which is where we took her into the water, and everything worked out. We didn't know what we would find when we got there. And then it was getting close to dusk, and we needed to find this tree. And we had staked out a tree on a previous trip, but we could not find this tree anywhere. Over time, because of, deforestation and urbanization and just, a loss of respect for some aspects of the environment, a lot of the cotton trees in Jamaica have been cut down. You used to see them along the road, according to photographs that I've seen. So we couldn't find a tree. And then we just slowed down and we asked a biker, "Do you know if there's any trees in the forest, any cotton trees?" And I said, "Look, it's right there." So it was just one of those moments, one of those fortuitous moments, but, maybe not an accident. And there was this, gigantic cotton tree where we were able to film in the last half an hour of light that we had.
It's amazing, and it's so beautiful and so evocative of the sort of layers of community and layers of lives, and it's beautiful. I wondered a little bit about the idea of story, and I didn't want to ask you about necessarily lost story, because it feels to me that story, just by becoming a story, has connections, so it's not lost. But there are things that are unheard stories or distorted stories, and it seemed that part of what you're saying in the film is something about getting something straight, like reclaiming a story, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is actually it's not unique to diasporic filmmakers, a desire to reclaim narratives from within our communities. And in particular, these types of traditions are hidden from many people, including myself. I didn't grow up in the Caribbean, but I spent a lot of time there, and I never knew about the Garifuna, the Dugu, the temple, and I never knew about Kumina, for instance. So I did feel in making the film that there was a need to reclaim, because these practices are dying and the story will be lost. But in the sense of, like reclamation that I had in mind and still have in mind for future projects is around really restoring in the purest essence, the purpose of the space, the purpose of a tradition. And of course, there are purposes, there are ways in which these things are used that may not be close to the original purpose. And that's also okay, that's life. But I wanted to convey the essence of it and show that, there's a lot of integrity in the traditions that people carry with them when they migrate, and even as they evolve, there's still like a lot of wisdom in the things that they bring with them.
And is there something about there seemed to be something about respect as well in that you were sort of in the reclaiming?
Yeah, because there is a lot of stigmatization of the practices as well within the societies. It's not just, the West is looking down. It's the West has influenced the ways in which in our own communities we see and view people who are more African or less civilized than us live. And so, yes, there's a statement about that, but also I'm not editorializing that much. When I spoke with researchers, I spoke with the dancers and the musicians and the practitioners, all of whom are somewhat connected in this sort of like post-colonial journey to understand more of themselves, to reconnect with their ancestors and their past. Everyone sort of shared that vision. So it was something that I just wanted to bring forth in the film. Oh, I think it's muted.
Sorry. I was just saying there also, alongside that, there seemed to be something about resistance and the dancing body, you know, that by dancing, there's a form of resistance.
Yeah, that's something that I'm sure you're familiar with. And people also say it about the music of these cultures, right? That music is a resistance, just singing, you know, a traditional song, a social commentary or something. But or just singing the music that, you know, is yours is a form of resistance. There is this like debate, I guess, around dance and whether the body has memory of its past and if it's trauma and of the ways that the body moved in different spaces. I see that, and I also see that younger, you know, the younger generations are kind of like, it's just something that they're able to pick up on if they see any element of that and incorporate their modern technologies into that movement that is still within you know, the vernacular, you know, of the space. And but there is some intentionality as well, like with groups in Jamaica that are formed to reclaim folklore on a national stage, like the National Dance Theater Company. It's very intentional to go and research and document these practices and then sort of elevate them for the stage as a commentary on, again, the value of those practices. Yeah, yeah. So I think, yeah, there's definitely a sense of resistance. And one more comment about resistance is that really, although Kumina is a spiritual practice, revivalism and probably Kumina were used in resistance, whether it was by the slaves or by the newly liberated Blacks in particularly, I mean, all over the island of Jamaica, but including in places like St. Thomas, where Kumina is from. And people like Paul Bogle, who was a revolutionary leader in the 1860s, were known to have been revivalists because this gave them a spiritual power outside of the authority of Western civilization, right? So, so yes, definitely resistance is connected to the music, the dance, and all of it.
And there's something in the also in the power of engaging with loss and change, and I wonder if you could say a little bit about I know it was personal loss that maybe moved you into this project, and I'm wondering, what did you learn about loss from making the film?
I'm not sure if I learned so much about loss, but I learned to embrace my own grief. I realized that grief was, I mean, really years into the project, grief is what drove me. And I experienced grief while making the film that I wasn't even able to name. And so in the final, you know, like putting together of the project and using all your creative abilities, really digging it out of yourself, you know, I realized that I was doing it because if I didn't do it, you know, these things would haunt me, including Queenie's own voice, who I'd been sitting with for 3 years, you know, which is also a loss, right? And it's not necessarily a sadness there, but there's still the process of grieving for what has been lost and the people that you will never be able to meet. So those two things, I guess, were parallel. I lost my mother just when I had decided to make the film. I started researching it while I was losing my mother. And then Queenie kind of, you know, that notion of her loss kind of propelled me to finish it. And I hope that that can can kind of transcend the film into other projects. And I hope that it's something that I can be in dialogue with other artists, because I think it's definitely a fuel for the work.
And there's something in the sort of spiritual practice about being able to sit in that place of transformation.
Absolutely. Very, very, very difficult for me personally. So I would put that out as a testimony, you know, but you get through it and you figure out what it is you have to say. And hopefully, you know, people can relate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder if there's any questions from people. There's just to not see. Oh, no questions yet. Okay, that's great. So we can carry on chatting a little bit more. Could you say a little bit about, it would be really interesting to hear how this film sits with other films that you've made, like you have made a film about Dr. Steins, for instance, and she also is in this film. How does it sit with your...
Right. I haven't made a film about Dr. Steins, but Dr. Steins is going to be in a film, and she was also featured in a Netflix documentary, actually. And I did do other interviews with her that are not in the film. She was the first person who told me about Queenie. Mm-hmm. She lived with Queenie in the bush for some months when studying dance. She's also a priestess in her own right. So, you know, I could make a million films because there's so many people I'd love to. But in terms of my own work, there's only this one, which is Winter Soul, and everything else I've made is for other people or with other people. But I think the film is in conversation with, let's say, yes, this dance film that just came out, and films like, I would hope it's in conversation with films like, I won't be able to pronounce it, but Jessica Duvin de la, it's a film about Haiti and the relationship with the mother, mm-hmm. who had challenges, but it's told through the lens of Vodun, and talks about some of the stigma around Vodun. So, but there's music and dance, you know, similarly. So I was inspired by that film, and I think there's many others.
Mm-hmm. So I think also we're talking a little bit about how film, dance, and music kind of sort of come together, because it's not a film about dance and music. You've used dance and music as part of the, almost like part of the structure of the film. So how film, dance, and music come together to tell story.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's wrapped up in that statement, which wasn't originally in the film. My editor said you have to put this in, which is L'Antoinette says, you know, in Africa they don't have different words for dance, sing, and you know, and essentially spirit, like all of those things are, you know, embodied in one vision and one ritual. And so that's why we made this film this way. But again, learning about other cultures, it seems that that is somewhat universal. I mean, that we can really connect with our past, with our future through this prism. But, you know, in the West, we've often held things separate. We learn this, we learn that, but they're all part of oneness, you know. And not to be, you know, woo-woo about it, but yeah, I think it's an important shift in my perspective to understand the way people view and learn tradition and learn to navigate their identity and their sense of, you know, place in the world.
Did making the film change? So part of what we're saying, I think, is how the moving body and the dancing body can frustrate or bring a halt to the linearness of things. Like dance moves, it doesn't just move forwards and back; it moves all around. Did you find that your own relationship with your body changed at all in making the film?
I mean, there's definitely a piece of embodiment there, but I would connect that for me personally, not to dance, but to nature, because in dancing in a ritualistic space, at least in the Kumina space, you run the risk of being possessed. And I was not positioned to do that because I need to document. I can't be in and out. So I didn't dance too much. but I did, I did allow myself to be present in the space, and I moved to Jamaica actually for almost a year during the pandemic, and my ritual was to be in nature, and I definitely became much more in tune with my body. I do believe in, embodied practices like meditation, and that I also believe that, being in nature is a form of reclamation as well. Yeah, especially when you're in an ancestral land that you have some connection to.
And it sort of brings us back around to Queenie, which is around the idea of how poignant do you feel that is in terms of being identifying as a Black woman?
Yes, I mean, I really think that Queenie is a wonderful vehicle for Black women's stories. In general, there's so many nameless, faceless Black women who, again, had these like healing technologies, who brought their communities together, who cared and tended for children who weren't theirs, who celebrated their culture. And unfortunately, many of them were not able to take it to the stage like Queenie. So, I mean, for me, as a Western educated Black woman, I just relate to her because I feel that there was power that I'm able to acquire that was not part of my own upbringing. This hidden power of Black women, and it's really, really potent.
And sorry to keep asking about that one thing, but I'm just also interested in how the land itself also operated in that kind of sense of reclaiming or power of what it is to be a Black woman.
Well, certainly. I mean, I moved to Belize first years ago to make the first film, and I worked there, and I started a program for youth storytellers. And being in that land was also very potent for me because it connected me directly to 200 years of history. And there were Black women in my family who were not, known, and they didn't have any power. The men had the power. Some of them were white men. But when you look into the histories, you see how they were really controlling things into the future. And then being in Jamaica, it's like Belize, but even more African in its roots, more visibly African, at least in its roots and in its practices. And I did feel spending time there, and I always have, but especially being immersed in the film, that I felt an elevation as a Black woman. I felt a celebration of that, power, that it was appreciated in that environment. And I definitely will carry that with me into any other space where I go.
It seems like it's a sort of power around a kind of generosity, right? A kind of ability to give and not have that feel like something that's taken from you.
Absolutely. That's it, 100%. As a Western woman, you feel, you believe in a feminist approach, which is valid, right? But in this context, at least from what I experienced, I felt that there was an elevation of the woman as healer, as giver, as caregiver, and it didn't take away from her strength or knowledge or abilities. I think that that's something that's been a little bit lost.
Mm-hmm. As before we finish, I wondered if there were any moments that you now think back on as you were making the film that you feel were really significant to the process.
Sure. I think definitely the moment with the cotton tree. There were also moments where the Kumina rituals were very powerful, but there was nothing that happened where I could have named what I was witnessing. We have to leave it to interpretation. But there was one Kumina, and it's a daytime Kumina that I attended, and that was very powerful for me because the people there were relaxing. It was joyful, and there was dancing, and there was one woman who I know very well who was being possessed, and that was a bit violent. As you can see, the body is taken over by the spirit, the ancestor, and it's a little bit violent. But as soon as she was held so carefully by her people. And then just adjacent to that, you see the family probably 6 generations back, sitting on the tombstones of their ancestors. It was just such a powerful image. You know, while the drums are playing, it's right there. Everything is right there in the yard, in the home, and that was really special for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that way of being safe within the rhythm of the drum, like the whole thing is being held within the rhythm of the drum.
Yeah, absolutely. That drum is just so powerful. There's just no way to overstate it. Yeah. And I think, you know, there are moments in many people's experience, not mine, where the drum overtakes everything. And so again, the drum, like the woman, has a lot of power, and we may not recognize it or believe it, but you witness people, the drum's ability to bring people together, but also um, to make people sort of like leave this plane for a moment and connect with something higher or something else. And that's just like amazing to witness.
Great. Well, we are going to be finishing quite soon, and I'm really excited for people that haven't yet seen the film to see the film. It was yeah, it was really lovely to be able to watch it on the big screen, and I really felt like it was an opportunity to give voice to something that isn't usually given voice to. I wondered if there were sort of any last thoughts that you'd like to leave the people who might view the film with.
I just want to say that I appreciate your openness, and you know, I went on a journey. I hope you do too, and I hope that you can also share. You know, you can find us on the website kuminaqueen.net. Any feedback, ideas, or other experiences with us.
Okay, great. I think I've got a thing here about. Oh, there was a question on Facebook, I think, but I'm not sure how to get to that. Did you say you have a way? Could you say again the ways to kind of get hold of you or to carry on talking to you?
It's kuminaqueen.net, and we have a little form. Contact us either about a screening or you can just write us a note. I'll get it personally, and then you can follow us on Instagram at Kumina Queen, and Kumina is Kumina, and then Queen.
Okay, and thank you so much for the film and for talking to us today as well.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor. And I enjoyed the conversation so much.
Great.